Yeah, thanks for the applause, but actually I didn't know how long it would take for me to get here. I found out it's more than 8 hours, so I was oblivious to that fact. So, yeah, welcome. I hope you don't have the after dinner dip. My name is Jaap. I'm from the Netherlands, hence my terrible Danish. I can't say anything but tak. So, yeah, I'm a developer advocate. I still have Twitter up there because I haven't found anything better yet, but mostly active on LinkedIn, GitHub. I'm a developer advocate at Codium AI. So why that's important is because they gave me some swag. We'll have some, what's it called? We have some giveaway raffle later on tonight. So we have some stress balls. And to incentivize some questions. Sorry, thanks. We have some T-shirts as well. So if you're a bit of a coder, this might work for you. So whoever asks a question first, the first 3 people get a T-shirt. That's yeah.
How was your flight?
What size are you? Oh, sorry, I'll repeat the question for the live stream. How was my flight? Yeah, my flight was fantastic. It wasn't even delayed. We had this much snow in the Netherlands, and they canceled half the flights at the airport. So, sweet. So, what we'll do today is we'll talk. This is an introductory session on chaos engineering and LitmusChaos. So, just to get an idea for the room. How many people are already using chaos engineering in production? I see 1 hand, so that's raise both of them. Then we have 2. Yeah, 2 hands. So we'll talk a bit about the why of chaos engineering, what it is and what it isn't. The biggest thing is that with chaos engineering, you're actually running experiments. Because introducing chaos in your system is really simple. Just let an end user touch your systems and you have the chaos already. What we're trying to do is run experiments against it. Then we'll talk a bit about LitmusChaos, why LitmusChaos. I used to work with the guys from LitmusChaos, so yeah, they introduced me to the platform, so now it's a tool that I know. There's a couple more as well. Which one are you using? Ah, okay. Not Litmus.
Sorry.
That's okay, at least there's something new for you as well. All right, so why chaos engineering? I always like to start off by pointing at other people's mistakes, because in my career, it's been a while, I've been in tech for a while, I've of course never had any failures, so let's talk about a couple of failures. They all have something in common. So in this case, there was a faulty database script that gave permissions to everyone, and then they had to turn off the access to all of their services. And it took some time as well, so yeah, not fantastic. Even longer than my flight here, so. We'll go over another one. So this was one with Cloudflare. They entered an empty array. This one also works really well with rm-rf. It's I did that one once, but it wasn't my computer, so it was perfectly fine. Customer not so happy. So. Another one where there was a wrong ID and Atlassian accidentally deleted 400 of their customers. This one was 14 days, so that was another one. And to tie it all together, why am I showing this? Except because it's fun to point and laugh at others, especially when they're not here. Is that our systems nowadays are getting more and more complex, and being able to understand all the variables when you're writing a small script or you're running a single service is something that that's easy to control and to map out. But when you have multiple microservices, different systems, different versions, maybe even different cloud platforms all interacting with each other, the amount of permutations are becoming so complex that even with the best intentions, it gets very hard. At least for me, it gets very hard. Yeah, this one is to give an indication of what the outages are costing and what kind of impact it has. Obviously, the biggest problem with this is that if you're a public-facing company, that you lose customer confidence. And I've heard a case of online shopping platform that went down for 1 minute because an incorrect piece of code was committed directly to main. So they did have the fail fast, fail frequently mentality, but yeah, the recovery only took 1 minute, but that 1 minute cost 10 million. So those kind of situations we want to prevent. Or as friendly Mr. Dumpster likes to say, prevent a dumpster fire from happening, or at least a dumpster fire that they can trace back to you. So a couple of common failures. I'm not sure if this is clear. Should have made it a bit bigger. I won't read all of them, but power failure, resource exhaustion, latency, maybe some kind of bug, but most likely DNS. Let's see. So I already alluded to it in my introduction. So what is chaos engineering? So it's the practice of putting the chaos inside of experiments, and that is also the goal of LitmusChaos. So validating that your platform is resilient under certain conditions. So you can think of something simple as what happens if I kill a couple of my pods? Will they come back up? Is my servers resilient? And being able to score, experiment, and continuously run those experiments to be able to see what happens to your infrastructure or your services. And we do that through the process of fault injection. So intentionally injecting faults into the system. And then I like to go over the history. So the first time it was mentioned, at least what I could find, was in 2004 in the Master of Disaster. Netflix is of course a very well-known example because they really built out chaos engineering. Netflix originally came from a situation where they had their entire content library, customer library, all in a single database that was just vertically scaled. So at that point in time, it never failed, otherwise we wouldn't have Netflix anymore. If it would have failed at that point in time, that would have been a company-ending event. So as a result of that, they started with Chaos Monkey, Simian Army, and I think the biggest one is called Gorilla or something that knocks out entire availability zones. The next one is that AWS, maybe you know it, small cloud provider from the West Coast, released a well-architected framework, and chaos engineering was added. Cool. So, anyone have any questions up until this point?
How to spot an ongoing chaos engineer in the wild? Like how to spot if Amazon is doing something in their networks?
So the question is how can we spot if a chaos experiment is going on in a production environment? Is how I'd formulate it. Is that right?
Right.
Well, it depends how well the service is written. as an outside observer, it's very hard to determine if it's bad code, an infrastructure that doesn't scale well, or any other of a million reasons that something isn't working. Within Amazon, the team that's running the chaos experiment, whatever kind of tool they use for it, I think there's also an Amazon branded tool for it, but if anyone knows, please fill that one in. If the services are set up correctly, and if the experiments are configured in a way that the moment it impacts production and that's detected, it would automatically revert. So yeah, in those scenarios, you wouldn't notice that. But it really depends on the maturity of your product as well. So these are 2 t-shirts, and I'll go for the 3rd t-shirt, and then we're out.
So how do you reconcile chaos engineering and injecting faults with observability and monitoring? What I mean by this, for example, is a lot of service owners may be quite interested in the state performance of their service and may deeply investigate any fault they see, for example, with their logs or with their metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Some may even cause them to get paid, for example. But when I inject a fault, I want to make sure that I'm not going to waste a human's time if the system reconciles itself. How can you do that and make sure that they're not going to be coming to you annoyed saying like, oh, you disconnected our storage, you utter.
So the question is about observability and how you make sure that another person doesn't get paged, or a ticket gets created, or they get an alert that they need to action on. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, effectively.
Okay. So how can you make sure of that? Well, if you're doing it in a production environment, and initially when you start with chaos engineering and you're new to the practice, I probably wouldn't start with production. I would take steps towards that. There's a concept of scoping as well, so you can scope it to a certain environment or certain namespaces, so you can limit the impact that way. Specifically for monitoring and alerting, it's also possible to enter in custom steps in which you can either put a note, depending on the monitoring tool you use, put a note that there's an ongoing chaos experiment, or suspend any notifications of that warning while the experiment is running. So there's very much dependent on the tool that you're using, but if it has an API or can in some way be configured, you could make that part of the experiment. And I saw another question in the back.
Yeah, that kind of relates to this. Actually doing tests on your runtime environments, your live environments, is that even a good idea? Or can we just make predictable scenarios, just like Black Friday? And then have that on a test setup and actually see how it will handle it.
Yeah, so the question is it smart to run it in your production environment? Because you can also set up a test environment which is a mirror of your production environment. The problem with having a mirrored or having a test environment is I've never been able to make 100% copy, or at least, well, I've been able to make 100% copy of any kind of environment, but the moment they diverge, they're going to be they're going to be changes, and there might be specific configurations or specific scenarios that only occur in the production environment, because it might be tied to actual physical routers, or you're routing to your internet provider, and there's some limitation there that is only triggered when 50 different scenarios are all aligned and they cause that one error. So the idea is to run it in your production environment, but you take it one step at a time. So when you're load testing, you don't load test against all the zones at once or all your resources at once. You see first, you work towards that.
But it's kind of like war games.
Yeah.
You don't want to do the live ammunition if you can avoid it. Just to figure out what is the end scenario.
Yeah. If it's just load testing, that's something that's easy to simulate. But if you're doing more complex experiments, then yeah, I would go for the live ammo, because if there's no real danger, then yeah, I lose my passion as well. All right, then little bit about LitmusChaos. So LitmusChaos is a CNCF incubating project. They've been so since, I think, 2022, maybe 2021, not 100% sure. And as what happens with projects like that, there's a lot of different components. And this one gives a better overview. So I'm going to walk slightly out of frame and point at things. Sorry. So there's three different layers. So we have our end user talking to the front end to create a workflow. We have the chaos control plane. So that is by default is the Litmus namespace in which you run the Litmus services. And then there's the execution plane where you can have the different agents, the different chaos operators running. So that is how you can integrate it into your Kubernetes cluster. Also, it doesn't matter if it's local or in the cloud. I don't like to waste the battery of my my machine, so I always run my clusters in the cloud. It's an 8-hour flight, so I need to watch some Netflix. I spend my battery power on that. As I mentioned, it comes with a lot of functionality. I'll highlight a couple of them of what they have. So the Chaos Center is where you can create the workflows. You can set schedules for your experiments to run. So you can prioritize experiments. You can set up custom scoring. So if, for example, latency is very important, you can give a higher weight to that metric. If that's more important than keeping a low CPU load or fast database response. Yeah. There's different ways of doing the workflow. So I already alluded to the resilience score. GitOps is also possible, and for creating the experiments, you can also create your own custom images. Other than that, there's multi-tenancy built in. You can set the scope on which you're running your experiments. That was the first time I worked with Litmus. I just gave it access to my entire, well, it wasn't my cluster. It's a recurring theme. I always just assume that I know what I'm doing. I'm the end user that causes the chaos. That's the real. Yeah, so you can set the scope. You can set up authentication. Set up teams. So you make it. Yeah, you can make it manageable from a platform engineering point of view. That you can limit who can run which experiments, because you don't want, I want to say a junior, but really you don't want a person like me bringing down a production environment because I fat-fingered the button. So I guess that's part of the safekeeping keeping there. And the nice thing is we got a question about observability and what we can do with that. So we can connect different data sources, visualize it, compare things, and we can create dashboards, because the one thing we need in the world is more dashboards. And I mentioned that you can write your own experiments. There's a number of experiments that the people from Litmus created themselves, but there's also Chaos Hub. Chaos Hub is the app store, the repository for community contributed chaos experiments. So to get an idea of the sorts of categories that are out there, obviously Kubernetes, all the big cloud providers, and what's the fun one? And because I saw a VMware jersey, of course it also includes VMware. So a couple of examples. So we can do pod chaos or node chaos. We can do different things with the network. So latency, packet loss, duplicated traffic. And also it's possible to go into the application layer or into the cloud layer. So there's different ways of introducing chaos and seeing how resilient it is. Obviously, pod chaos is something that's very easy to simulate yourself because it's quite easy to kill a pod and just see what happens. But the idea of using these kind of tools is that you can continuously run it as an experiment. And one of the ways that we did this in previous projects I worked on was that we also implemented chaos engineering inside our CI pipeline. It's a longer running job, so you don't do it for every commit, but it can give you an extra bit of certainty if you integrate chaos engineering inside your development workflow. A couple of things about the roadmap. So the Chaos SDK, there's also SDK available for direct interaction with it. If you don't like the GUI, I'm not a big GUI fan, so more observability. So it is always possible to manually dive into the logs, but they're working at better integrations for all the different platforms to have more connectors built in, and also to introduce more chaos types. And with that, I'm going to switch over, show a bit what is necessary to deploy this. It's a pretty short amount of steps. I've already deployed it, and then I'll show what it looks like when it's up and running. And that is assuming that my internet is still up. So let's find out. Yep. So we'll go over, and I'll make that bigger. Is this visible in the back? Yeah, okay. There we go. Because I'm running because my cluster is in the cloud, first connect to Azure, get my creds. Once I have that set up, installing Litmus. All the documentation is also available on docs.litmus.com. Add a Helm repo, create a namespace, and install it in the namespace. So that part is pretty straightforward. You can take a look at the pods that are created. I'll open up this one. And then we can see if we're still connected. Nice. I have a touch bar, so I don't have a button to run my code, so it's super fun. Let's take a look at what services we have running in there. Is this the one? No. Yes. And you can see that it comes with a number of services. The one that we are particularly interested in is the front-end service. Because I'm running it remotely, we can tunnel this with kubectl. You're probably familiar with that. And after that, we use kubectl to apply the Litmus portal credentials to make sure it gets access to our environment, and then enable the chaos for my specific environment, in my case, a pet store. Yeah, let's go over to the admin panel. So now to see if we still have a connection to it. Let's see, caffeine is still running. Yes, good. So we can see that we're currently, oh, I'll make it bigger as well. So we can see a couple of things here. We are currently in the admin project because it's a standard one. We have a single infrastructure. We just have a regular Chaos Hub. We can set up our experiments in Chaos experiments. We can connect to different environments. And the probes are the agents that I mentioned before. That you can configure to target specific resources and to run specific experiments. And with that, then we have Chaos Hub. So Chaos Hub, that was the wrong link. Chaos Hub is what I just mentioned in the slideshow, is the one with all the different Chaos experiments, so you can clone them, and they've definitely been more successful than any repository that, or any Docker image that I ever created, because they're on 23 million. That's, what's the population of Denmark?
6 million?
6 million, yeah, that's more than the population of Denmark and the Netherlands combined. Useless fact of the presentation.
So what are those experiments? Are they customer resource definitions?
Yeah, so I can let's go for AWS because so for example, stopping your EC2 or stopping EC2 by tags. Let's see, those are not the most interesting one. Well, I'm not very good at clicking buttons. And if we, excellent. So some of the ones I listed on the slide. So we can drive up CPU load or pod latency. Let's see if we can find something fun that's random. For Kubernetes, modify HTTP headers to introduce failure in that way. HTTP resets. Yeah, there's a number of options available there. And with that, the last one I still wanted to show, because we, what's the word? My approach to getting talks accepted is first by talking about something that I know, and secondly to just slap some Gen AI on it, because it always always gets my session selected. So so let's see what we can do with that. So let's make this one smaller. There we go. So you can see that I copied one of the YAML files. This one is for which one did I download? Oh yeah, this is for pod delete and revert chaos. So it's a format in which the chaos tests are formulated, and because it might not be immediately obvious by just going to a YAML file and having to find out what's happening here. What I did was I told it to analyze this code, and we can see that it gives a nice description, tells which namespace things are running in, and we also get the workflow of how this pod operates. So that's the generative AI part. We can use this to analyze our code directly from our IDE. And that's, of course, nice, but we can also take it a step further, and we can do that by, in this case, I asked it to give me a description of what this workflow does, and can interact with it, asking what if it's safe to run, which is always a fun one. And I wouldn't trust AI with that. Is anyone a consultant here?
Yeah, I've told me to do it.
So yeah, I think ChatGPT and all the generative AI models, they're like the best consultant because they lie so confidently to you. Zero regrets. If an AGI later looks at this video, I'm sorry, spare me. Yeah, so you can get it to give recommendations or to get information out of it. Pretty similar to what you can do with any of the generative AI models to get a understanding of what kind of experiments you're running and also make additions to it. So if we would go for, if I go for improve. And with that one, let's see, I can do this without messing it up. So that's always a moment of truth for me, that whenever I go back to my presentation, go back to the correct slide. Usually I press the wrong button and then you have to wait for me for a minute to, but I guess now I'm rambling about it for a minute, so that makes no difference. So the big takeaway is there are no failed chaos experiments, there's just happy little accidents. With that, I'd like to open it up for further questions, either about the demo or anything that was covered.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I remember I was trying Chaos Toolkit like 3 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And they were trying to do something they call continuous verification, where
Yeah.
they sort of combine that with chaos engineering, where you define like I'm expecting this thing to happen when I inject this kind of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and I run this continually. Is that also possible with LitmusChaos, and how are you sort of defining your experiments and the possible outcomes of those experiments?
Yeah.
And can you run them like continuously on schedule or something like that?
Yeah. So the question is about continuous verification. How does LitmusChaos handle continuous verification? How are experiments run? So you can indeed schedule the experiment. So you could schedule it to start the moment the experiment stops. So continuously running. You can start it by API calls using the LitmusChaos SDK. So yeah, you have a control over how you run that. And continuous verification is something that also works in combination with LitmusChaos. If you want to go more the Netflix approach, then you can also have a random script that just fires off experiments at your environment without knowing what will be launched, and then you can test true resilience. I'm not brave enough for that, but I like to keep the chaos more controlled. And this one is a direct link to learning more about Litmus. Yes?
Yeah, I think I saw the narco-CD workflow for
Yeah.
the experiment. Is that required to run LitmusChaos, or can you use other workflow engines?
Litmus is, as far as no, I'm not going to give. I'm not 100% sure. I thought it was, but it might be possible to run it on different engines. But I personally never did, so I'll have to look that up for you. And for the viewers, the question was if it only runs on Argo.
So when you're running the experiment and you get a lot of chaos, what is the output in Litmus? What can you see if you run an experiment? What can you see to make a new decision?
Okay, so the question is about what kind of output do you get from Litmus when you're running the experiment. So the pure output is going to be a resilience score. So you get a score based on what kind of weights you have put on the different parts of the experiment. So if your service keeps on running uninterrupted, even though you blast the CPUs on a couple of the either nodes or pods, then it would get a passing score, 100. The score is from 0 to 100. From there, you can also dive deeper into what has happened to your application. You can go into the logs; they're directly available from each of the runs of the experiments.
Yeah. So an outcome is, or that you need to specify like an expected outcome of whenever I do introduce some kind of chaos, I expect this to happen, and if that is not the case, then it sort of gives you a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of, or the score you're mentioning.
So the question is, when you're setting up your experiments, do you have to configure what your expected outcome is for each of the experiments? If you use the standard experiments, you can just take them as is, and the resilience score will just be calculated by either Litmus, if they are the ones that created the experiment, or a community member. It is possible to adjust the weights for your specific outcome, and it's also possible to customize experiments further by taking existing ones and making them applicable to your application. So, for example, if you have an application that does a lot of API calls to HTTP, you can see what happens if you have some kind of funky reverse proxy that is messing with the HTTP headers, and how your application behaves with that under certain scenarios. Yep.
As a consultant, I'm actually not capable of flying as fast as business managers. And they usually come up with service level agreements that have quite ridiculous requirements. Could you use LitmusChaos to actually validate those service level agreements? Like 99% uptime, and now we throw some chaos at it.
So the question, well, the first, it wasn't a question, it was, the statement was, business development managers are filthy liars. And can we call them out on their SOAs by using chaos engineering? I think it's more of a question of validating the technical design than the lies of the business of the BDM. Can you call them out? Yeah, but it's more testing if the design works as expected. It really depends on the scope of the SOA and the project if it can work for that. But you could use the dashboarding, you could use the reporting in Litmus, and by introducing those failures to chaos experiments, and you can use that and hand it on a platter.
See, those clauses are just put up when stuff breaks.
Yeah.
That's when they go into effect.
Yeah.
They don't go into effect while we try to validate the design or whatever product is provided.
Yeah.
So it could be a precursor test bed for that, in my opinion. Because usually it's first when stuff breaks and then you go to court.
Yeah.
Do you ever run kind of user acceptance tests or factory acceptance tests for this kind of SLA requirements?
Yeah, pretty much any SLA requirement is arbitrary until it breaks.
Oh God.
That's when they go into effect.
That's
And
terrible.
that's when you call the lawyers and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
So could you
sorry.
use this tool, for example, to check for DOS attacks in your system, to emulate some kind of discovering attack surfaces in your system, and how some kind of white source or white attack?
So the question is, can we use this to detect attacks on the network, like DOS or DDoS attacks? Yeah, you can use it for that. So what you would do then is you would could set up experiments that emulate pumping in ridiculous amounts of data to certain pods that are exposed to external endpoints. You could try to introduce an application failure that causes your application to get into a loop so it floods one of the other application servers, see how that behaves. You can have it, what's another popular way of doing DDoS attacks. Probably shouldn't showcase that I know too much about that. Another one is where you use up all the WebSockets on the server. I think it's called slow llama attack or something, or slow some. What?
Slow Loris.
Slow.
Loris, I think it is.
Slow Lars?
I can't remember now.
Okay. We'll check it afterwards. But there is an attack where you just use up all the sockets on a web server by just very slowly sending out messages back, and then it completely fills up, but it keeps the connections open because the timeout is set too high. Those kind of attacks, yeah, you can all simulate that and set up experiments for that. And yes.
How do we create customer experiments?
Customer experiments?
Like custom experiments.
Yeah. So the question is, how do you set up custom experiments? The way you set up experiments is through Chaos Hub. You can create an experiment there. You can pull them out of Chaos Hub, or you can supply your own YAML file. That was the reason I pulled up VS Code, because you can edit and configure them there. And once you make changes to the experiment, you can submit them as an experiment, or if you're using GitOps, you can push them to the repository, and then they're in practice.
Okay, so you can't contribute to like open source repository, or
You can't, or you can?
you can't.
No, you can.
Okay.
So yes, everything in Chaos Hub is open source and online on GitHub. So if you see an experiment that's missing, so for example, when I opened up AWS, there weren't a lot of interesting experiments there. If you're using AWS and you see something is missing, you could either contribute to the repository or fork it and add your own things to it, and then submit it to Chaos Hub. So there's multiple options to contribute there. And yeah, LitmusChaos is also open source and available, so there's the potential to contribute to the main project as well. Yes?
Every big company seems to fail with these lovely certificates running out. Are there in any way that this can help figuring out these lovely issues?
So the question is, can chaos engineering or LitmusChaos help with expiring certificates? I would say it's more of a reporting issue than it is a chaos issue. So how I would use LitmusChaos is by just simulating that a certificate expired, and but that would require you knowing which certificates you have where, because otherwise you can't you can't pull them back. Or you can do a get random on the certificate store and just expire them one by one and see when things start failing. So that yeah.
If you revoke them, though, you can never unrevoke them. As much as you technically can, PKI is a complete mess. If you revoke them, servers will not forget, even if you tell them to.
All right, I think we are out of time and out of questions. So thank you so much for introducing us to chaos engineering and Litmus. And yeah, let's give Jaap a big round of applause.